ideal. And there is a constant argument from the realists that ideals cannot be realized. That since the ideal contradicts the actual or real, ideal cannot become real. The real is always something that is actually realized. The ideal is always something that is still conceived for realization. And therefore, the realist has always an edge to show here it is here already, what we say is here already. What you say is not there and cannot be because there is no ground here for it. Aurobindo says, because of the contradiction between the actual and the ideal, and actual being real, ideal cannot be real. This is the argument which is often presented in all the debates. It's a long-standing debate in the world history. There was, for example, a great debate both in England and France at the time of monarchy. Monarchy was something that was actual. And in the condition of monarchy, there was a tremendous movement of tyranny. As a result of tyranny, there was a revolt. And the idealists began to put forward the ideal of liberty. And the idealists were told that monarchy is something already there and it cannot be taken away, it cannot be uprooted, and therefore liberty is impossible. You can't have liberty. It's a dream which you can never realize. And yet, ultimately, monarchy was attacked. In England, Charles I, the monarch, was beheaded. In France, Louis XVI was beheaded. And liberty was allowed to grow. We can multiply the examples of this kind of oppositions which have been marked in the history of the world. Even so, this ideal of God, light, freedom, immortality, they are exactly the opposites of our material existence. Material existence is already there, is actual, real. And these ideals are unrealized, and therefore the argument is they are unrealizable. Because they are unrealized, therefore they are unrealizable. Why? Because they contradict the real. Real is real, that which contradicts real is unreal, and therefore they cannot be realized. This is the form of the argument. Metaphysically, it's a logical argument of this type. Whatever contradicts the real is unreal. Real is already here. That which is contradicted cannot be. And therefore the argument is that human aspiration, whatever it may be, it cannot be realized. The entire argument of the whole book, not only of this chapter, but the whole book is that human aspiration is realizable. Not only realizable, but it is inevitably realizable. It must be realized. And actually the opposition which is there is itself the proof, and this is the important argument, is itself the proof that this is going to happen. Now this form of argument is to be seen in its logical complexity. It's almost saying, because it is impossible, it is possible. The argument is, because it is impossible, it is possible. Not only that, because it is impossible, it must happen. Not only possible, it must actualize itself. Now, Sri Aurobindo deals with this argument by a statement that you must ask the question, why should there be a contradiction between the real and the ideal? That is to say, the argument is turned upside down. Why is it that there must be such a thing at all, such a contradiction? To merely say that because ideal is opposed to the actual, and actual is real, therefore the ideal is unreal, this argument does not go into the depths of the question. And Sri Aurobindo says you don't go to the depth of the question because you are not sufficiently philosophical. You are not sufficiently metaphysical. Why? Because metaphysical reasoning must ask this basic question, why is this contradiction at all there? What's the reason behind this contradiction? What is the rationality of this contradiction? Why should there be such a contradiction at all? So Sri Aurobindo says, if you ask this question, that is to say, if you ask a real metaphysical question, then you are led to a deeper inquiry and a deeper answer. So Sri Aurobindo now expounds that argument. Why is it that such a contradiction should at all exist? Why should man at all aspire? If the ideal is unrealizable, why should a human being, why should he be such a condition that he aspires? The very thing that is impossible, why does he demand? What is in him that demands it? Why should it be so? So Sri Aurobindo says that, and this is an important point of the philosophical argumentation, you must know the facts squarely. What are the facts which you are to see squarely? And Sri Aurobindo gives now a general proposition that this movement of actual and ideal and the opposition between the two is the very method of nature. If you examine the facts of life, facts of existence, that these facts reveal a method of nature. Nature itself is so constituted. Why it is so constituted shall come to later on. But the fact is that wherever you look around, there is a constant battle of the actual and the ideal. And this battle itself is the major factor of the method of nature. Nature itself is a movement of a battle between the actual and the ideal. And therefore, if you examine, you will find that there is a law of the method of nature, namely, to harmonize. This is, word harmonizing is the law of nature. Wherever there is a beginning, there has got to be an outcome out of it which seems to oppose it. And then there is a movement of harmonization. Now this argument was caught by many philosophers in the West. Particularly, it was defined very starkly by Hegel, who pointed out that the whole movement of the universe is dialectical. It moves from thesis to antithesis and antithesis to synthesis. And he turned this actually into a metaphysical argumentation. And he pointed out by numerous examples that the whole history is a history of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Synthesis again producing an antithesis, producing further synthesis, and so on. In fact, it is this idea of history which was taken up by Marx. And even today, Marxism is quite an alive philosophy. And according to Marxists, this antithesis and overcoming of antithesis by synthesis is a necessity of the present movement. Capital and labor, capitalism produces the problem of the conflict between capital and labor. There has to be a synthesis, but synthesis can come about only first of all when labor is transposed into a position of power and capital becomes subordinate. Until you bring about this position, you cannot arrive at equality and ultimate harmony. And that is why they speak of historical necessity. The conflict between capital and labor is a historical necessity, and you can't escape it. You can't escape because what is to come out has got to be a synthesis. Now this movement of nature which moves from one state to the other, which is its opposite, this movement of nature is considered to be over-pervasive. But these metaphysicians do not ask the question, why should it be so? Why is the method of nature of this kind? What is the reason behind it? And this question is answered much later in the book, not immediately. This question is still kept into a state of exposition, not yet an answer. Sri Aurobindo gives some examples to show that the method of nature is really of this kind. And Sri Aurobindo gives 3 examples, not merely from the ordinary examples of history of the humankind, but from the history of the world itself, the entire world. The nature of matter, life and mind. These are the 3 steps of nature's movement. There is first manifestation of matter, then there is a manifestation of life, and then there is a manifestation of the mind. Now, if you look at the nature of matter and life, you will find that matter and life are exactly opposite of each other. The nature of mind and life are exactly opposite of each other. There must be a fundamental reason behind it. Method of nature being of this kind, there must be a reason behind it. In this paragraph which you read yesterday and left unexplained, that paragraph only states the contradiction between matter and life and mind. And Sri Aurobindo points out that this contradiction is sought to be harmonized. Although the two are contradictory of each other, matter and life are opposed to each other, and yet life is injected successfully into matter to such an extent that no living organism on the earth can be without material body. All organisms are required to be in physical body. Now, what is the opposition between matter and life, and what is the opposition between life and mind? I would like to go back to the text where Sri Aurobindo says how matter and life are opposed to each other. So if you open this page, the accordance of active life page number 4, no? What is the page number? 2. Akhilesh, you have got that page? The accordance of active life with a material of form in which the condition of activity itself seems to be inertia is one problem of opposites that nature has solved and seeks always to solve better with greater complexities. Now, this sentence is somewhat difficult to understand because Sri Aurobindo says, nobody denies the fact that life is active. If it was said that matter is inactive, it is very easy to understand. But Sri Aurobindo says that the very principle of activity in matter itself is the law of inertia. That is somewhat difficult to understand because when it is said by Newton that law of matter is the law of inertia. It doesn't mean that matter does not move. It means that first of all, matter requires to be moved. And secondly, once it is put into motion, it can't be stopped. It is inert in that sense. Therefore, that it can't be stopped is because of inertia. So the very activity which is there in matter, that activity itself is the activity of inertia. So life, on the other hand, is quite different. It does not require to be moved from outside. Life has inherent motion. It does not require to be moved from outside. And it can start moving by itself, it can stop moving by itself. Now these two things are opposite of each other. Not that matter has no activity in it, but the nature of that matter, that activity is that of inertia. It requires to be moved, and once it is moved, it